Adolf Hitler was responsible for the Nazi dictatorship, the outbreak of World War II in Europe, and the systematic persecution and murder of millions of people, including 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. Yet today, Hitler exists not only in history books, he exists in movies, documentaries, memes, short videos, edits, jokes, and algorithms. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Are modern media helping us understand Hitler, or are they creating a completely new version of him?
A history book can take hundreds of pages to explain Hitler. A movie has about 2 hours. So what happens when history has to become a story? Let's start with books. History books usually give us something extremely important: context. They explain Hitler's rise, Nazi ideology, propaganda, anti-Semitism, political violence, the Holocaust, and the consequences of his actions. Instead of simply asking, what did Hitler do? Historians can ask, how did he gain power? Why did people support him? And how did Nazi Germany become possible? But movies work differently. A filmmaker has to tell a story, and every producer, director, and writer brings their own artistic vision. One of the most famous examples is Charlie Chaplin's The Great Dictator. Released in 1940, while World War II was still happening, Chaplin created a satirical character that clearly mocked Hitler and fascist dictators. Instead of presenting Hitler only as a terrifying political leader, Chaplin used comedy and absurdity to expose the ridiculousness of dictatorship. And that's the interesting part. The historical figure didn't change. The way we looked at him did.
Now imagine taking Hitler's entire historical story and giving it 30 seconds. That's social media. A complicated ideology becomes a short clip. A speech becomes an edit. A photograph becomes a meme. A historical event becomes a dramatic montage with music, and suddenly, we're not necessarily studying. Algorithm doesn't ask, is this historically accurate? It asks, will people keep watching? This can create a strange new version of Hitler. Not necessarily the real historical figure, but a social media character. And that's where things become much more complicated.
But what if the biggest danger isn't simply misunderstanding Hitler?
What if we're creating little versions of him? Not literal copies, but simplified versions. A version stripped of the ideology, stripped of the victims, stripped of the consequences. A version that is remembered for dramatic speeches, confidence, power, military imagery, or a certain aesthetic. And every producer adds their own artistic vision. Every filmmaker chooses what to show. Every creator chooses what to cut. And every algorithm decides what gets pushed to millions of people. Over time, these small choices can create a completely different image. Imagine seeing the same powerful-looking edit again, and again, and again. Eventually, the image can become more familiar than the history behind it. That's the danger. Not that someone watches one video and suddenly becomes Hitler, but that the historical reality slowly gets replaced by a media-created character. And once a dictator becomes a character, people can start discussing him like a fictional protagonist. Was he charismatic? Was he intelligent? Was he powerful? Was he fascinating? But we're missing the most important question. What did that power actually produce?
Here's the uncomfortable part. The more entertaining a historical villain becomes, the easier it can be to forget why he was feared. We can analyze Hitler. We should analyze Hitler. We should understand how propaganda worked. We should understand why people followed him. But understanding is not admiration. And representation is not reality. The problem begins when the aesthetic becomes more memorable than the consequences. When the meme becomes more memorable than the victims. When the dramatic speech becomes more memorable than what followed it. When Hitler becomes an internet character instead of a warning from history. And this doesn't mean every movie or social media video is secretly trying to glorify him. Sometimes creators are criticizing him. Sometimes they're educating. Sometimes they're using satire. But the audience still has to ask what is being left out.
So, which Hitler will survive? The Hitler described by historians? The Hitler portrayed by filmmakers? Or the Hitler created by algorithms? Maybe the real danger isn't simply forgetting history. Maybe it's remembering history incorrectly. Because every medium gives us something different. Books give us context. Movies give us emotion. Social media gives us speed. But none of them alone gives us the whole picture. So the next time you see Hitler in a movie, a documentary, a meme, or a viral edit, stop for a second and ask, am I seeing history? Or am I seeing someone's version of history? Because when we change the way we remember the past, we can change the way we understand the present. And maybe the most disturbing question isn't, are we creating a